Hello students, welcome to my YouTube channel KS Teaching Group. Question number 172. What is the method of metal coating? Option A cladding, option A cladding, option B cerodizing, option C galvanizing, option D electroplating. Option D will be the correct answer. Electroplating. Option D electroplating. Question number 173. Which metal is used in electroplating to metal surface to resist corrosion for long period and to retain high polish? Option A lead, option B nickel, option C chromium, option D aluminum. Option C chromium. Chromium. Which metal protects corrosion resistant and does not crack or peel off due to temperature? Zinc, nickel, copper and chromium. 174. Option A zinc. Which corrosion resistant metal is used in chemical plant and food processing? Option A lead, option B copper, option C aluminum, option D stainless steel. Stainless steel. What is the purpose of thrust ball bearing? Option A axial load, option B radial load, option C axial thrust load, option D vertical thrust load. 176. Option number D will be the correct answer. What is the name of bearing? Option A needle bearing. What is the name of bearing? Option A needle bearing. Option A. Needle bearing. Which bearing material is used connecting rod and electrical motors? Option A white metal, option B sintered alloy, option C aluminum alloy, option D copper alloy. Copper lead alloy, option D. Copper lead alloy. What is the operation of metal coated with other metal to obtain protecting surface? Option A cladding, option B galvanizing, option C cementation, option D electroplating. Electroplating. Option D. Which metal powder is used in colorizing process to prevent corrosion? Option A zinc powder, option B nickel powder, option C chromium powder, option D aluminum powder. Option D aluminum powder. What is the temperature required to process the chromizing for prevention of corrosion? Option D 1300 degree Celsius to 1400 degree Celsius. Which metal has high resistance to chemical reaction? Lead, nickel, copper, aluminum. Nickel. What is the name of part marked as X? Ball cage, inner race, outer race, ball separating gauge. Gauge need cage. Correct করলে cage. Outer race. Inner race. Option D. Ball separating cage, not a gauge. Cage. Correct color. Which bearing material is used for light loading and low speed application? Cast iron, tin bronze, and cadmium based alloy, copper and lead alloy. Cast iron bearing material is used for low light loading and low speed application. Option A, correct answer. What is the disadvantage of thrust ball bearing? Cannot take any radial load, cannot take horizontal and thrust, cannot take load on both direction, cannot take any vertical thrust load. Cannot take horizontal and thrust. Option B. Cannot take horizontal and thrust. Why deep group type of ball races provided in the ball bearing? Withstand shock. Option B. Withstand axial thrust. Withstand radial load. Carry journal load. Withstand axial thrust. Option B. Which bearing carry the load parallel to its bearing axis? Option A, split bearing. Option B, plain bearing. Option C, thrust bearing. Option D, a radial bearing. Option C, thrust bearing. Which bearing material is best suited for hard journals? Option A, sintered alloy. Option B, aluminum alloy. Option C, copper lead alloy. Option D, cadmium base alloy. Option B, aluminum alloy. Which bearing material has low coefficient of friction and high material cost? Option A, nylon. Option B, teflon. Option C, thrust ball bearing. Option D, laminated phenolics. Option B, teflon. Which type of bearing used for taking high axial thrust? Roller bearing, tapered roller bearing. Option B, tapered roller bearing. What is the name of bearing? Option A, split bearing. Option B, solid bearing. Option C, thrust bearing. Option D, journal bearing. Option B, solid bearing. Solid bearing. What is the name of bearing? Ball bearing, roller bearing, thrust bearing, journal bearing. Option C, thrust bearing. What is the name of bearing? Split bearing, bush bearing, solid bearing, journal bearing. Option A, split bearing. What is the part marked as X in the bearing? Outer race, ball cage, inner cage, rolling element. Ball cage. Option B, ball cage. Which type of bearing used for a very heavy radial load? Option A, ball bearing. Option B, bush bearing. Option C, needle bearing. Option D, double row roller bearing. Double row roller bearing is the correct answer for this question. Double row roller bearing is used for very heavy radial load. Very heavy radial load. Which type of bearing is designed to take axial thrust as well as radial load? Axial thrust as well as radial load. Option A, ball bearing. Option B, roller bearing. Option C, taper roller bearing. Option D, angular contact bearing. Angular contact ball bearing. Option D. What is the name of instrument? Depth vernier gauge, vernier height gauge, clamp type height gauge with slip gauge holder. Option D. Answer. Height gauge with slip gauge holder. Which type of bearing metal is self lubricated? White metal, sintered alloy, aluminum alloy, cadmium base alloy. Sintered alloy. Self lubricating bearing material. Which bearing is used in the limited space? Option A, needle bearing. Correct answer. Which bearing is used in limited space? Option A, needle bearing. Which bearing loading is at right angles to the bearing axis? Option A, thrust bearing. Option B, journal bearing. Option C, solid bearing. Option D, split bearing. Option B, journal bearing. Which type of bearing has provision for wear adjustment? Which type of bearing has provision for wear adjustment? Option A, adjustable slide bearing. Correct answer. What is the type of key? What is the type of key? Option A, feather key. Option B, give head key. Option C, woodrop key. Option D, flat saddle key. Option C, woodrop key. Which part of ball bearing do not rotate along the bearing assembly? Which part of ball bearing do not rotate along the bearing assembly? Option A, ball cage, inner race, outer race, rolling element. Outer race. Why extra clearance is provided between bearing and journal in the aluminum alloy bearing? Option A, to allow lubricant to flow freely to overcome linear expansion. এটা লন্ডর ଦେଇଛି linear ଲେଖିବ. To overcome linear expansion, to overcome coefficient of expansion, to overcome high thermal expansion. To overcome high thermal expansion. To overcome high thermal expansion. How bunching up of rolling element by cage, by groups, by outrace, by inner race. By cage. How bunching up rolling elements by cage. Rolling element ଯେମିତି ମାନେ କ'ଣ ଟୁଗେଦର ହେଇଯିବ ମାନେ ଯେ ଗୋଟେ ଜାଗାକୁ ଗୁଛେଇ ପଳେଇ ଆସିବ যেটা କୁହନ୍ତି bunching. Avoided in the bearing assembly by cage. Next part ରୁ start କରିବା 207.